anybody else at the city?
Pound 6.
Good morning,
You are no longer muted.
So in the room with me today,
Rick Spryer, Director of Purchasing.
Pam Alvino?
Rick.
Pam Alvino, Personnel.
Hi, Pam.
Hi.
IT Director Jermaine Samuels.
did you hear Jermaine?
Morning, Jermaine.
Morning. Lee Tarrant, Corporation Counsel.
Hey, Lee.
Hey, Kim.
And that's everybody here.
Okay, thank you. All right. We have a quorum. We can get started. Julie, can you start the recording, please?
This meeting is being recorded and/or transcribed.
All right, thank you. I'd like to call to order today the meeting of the West Haven MARB.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press *6.
For opening remarks this morning, I want folks to know that CTN has joined us to record this meeting. Also, I'd like to make sure that we keep our comments and everything clear, concise. I have a hard stop today at 12 o'clock and with another meeting to follow immediately, so I will not be able to continue beyond 12. So hopefully we can get our work completed by that time or make a decision of what we're not going to work on today. Thank you everybody for joining. The first order of business today is to approve the minutes of June 9th as our subcommittee. If I could get a motion, please.
You are no longer muted.
Thank you. I'll take the second from you, Christine. Any discussion? I hear none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any abstentions or opposed? I hear none. All right, thank you. The motion carries and the minutes have been approved. Now we'll have an update on the fiscal year 2021 audit from the city. If somebody could please bring us up to date, that would be helpful.
I'll go ahead with that.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
I don't know who else, somebody else is talking to, because I'm not in the same room with that.
I know.
Is someone going to see me?
Nancy,
Go ahead,
I
Mayor.
I'm prepared if you'd like me to take it, Nancy.
Okay, and who?
David.
David.
David. Okay, absolutely. I'll just join in. If I need to, because I did speak to Joe Centofanti as well.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, David. Thank you.
So, two things. Mr. Centofanti and his team have been here since the 8th of June. So that's when fieldwork started. They're still looking at documents and working their way, through the initial phases of the audit. He indicated to me that he should be complete in the fall, and at that time be prepared to take up the FY22 audit, and would actually put us in the bag with all the rest of his FY22 clients. So hopefully we can wrap that by the end of the year. He did not give an indication as to the timing of that completion. So far as Cone Resnick, I spent most of the day yesterday sorting through copies of invoices, etc. for that, and I have all but 2 of their requests complete. They're being scanned into PDF documents as we speak, and hopefully should start loading those this afternoon.
Here you go, guys. Thank you, David. Thank you. Well, we appreciate that. That would be good news, so that somebody does take care of that audit, because that is critical. It is an OPM audit. All right. Any other questions or comments from the members or the staff on the FY21 or 22 audit?
Is it expected that there will be a progress reports or a flag of material issues prior to the completion of the audit in the fall?
We could ask the city to give us updates, Christine. and make us aware of any findings or at least like, items of alert as they go through the process. And so let's have them do that.
I would like to add one thing with that, so let the members know. So I did find out last week, I had conversation with Joe Centofanti and some of the group working on the audit. And one thing he alerted me to, and this finding has been before, so it's troubling, some of the Board of Ed side. And so he said that they're booking, I guess, grants incorrectly. And there was a finding last time, they're going directly to the general fund rather than going to the grant fund that each specific grant would have. So he said, because let's face it, FY21 has, been done, it's just not audited, if you will, and FY22 is almost there. He said to me, expect a finding in FY21 for that and FY22. So I just wanted to make you all aware of it. Now, we had a similar problem back in FY19, again, under Joe Centofanti. There's a similar finding with the similar wording. And there were other issues in FY19 as well with the Board of Ed. So, but I just wanted to make sure that all of the members on this call are aware of that.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor, that's helpful.
Sorry, I'm writing this down. All right. Next item on the agenda is for us to review and discuss impossible action of the 5-year plan.
Kim?
Yes. I'm sorry. Thank you. I had my head down.
I'm sorry. I just had a follow-up question to
Yes.
the question, and that is, can David tell us, do they have a scheduled regular meeting with the auditors on a weekly basis, bi-weekly basis, or some sort of schedule like that? And if so, would it be possible for, ideally, if we had a financial manager in place, I would like to see our financial manager attend that regular status meeting with the auditors, but absent that, I don't know whether Julian or someone else from representing OPM could attend that. So it's really a two-part question.
I'm not aware of a formal meeting. Perhaps, Nancy, are you?
Joe Centofanti didn't say anything about working up a schedule, but I'm sure we can contact him and find out if he, obviously I agree with you, it'd be easier to find out as we go along rather than at the end. And I do agree that the financial manager is in place for any kind of designee or anything like that. It'd be great to start working collaboratively with the folks that are being hired by OPM. So I'm all for that. We just have to check with Joe Centofanti to find out what type of scheduling he's looking at.
Yeah.
So, I would certainly recommend some kind of regular meeting with the auditor, even forget the review board's presence here, but just to make sure it's on track, and you don't want to get to September and find out, oh, they've been waiting for months and months for something that no one realized, oh, they were waiting for that or whatever. So I think a regular meeting, even if it's relatively short, it makes sense.
Kim?
I totally agree.
Right. I think that we should get an open items list that, or a status update from maybe the audit firm prior for us to bring to the subcommittee as we have for the next meeting. And so that's at least once a month we'll get a status update. If we feel we need it more, we can have it ready as well for the MARB meeting, because based on everything that's going on, I think it would be prudent for us to get a status update.
Yeah, Kim, Lee Ternan, Joe and his group have been here on Wednesday, so they're here yesterday. We talked about this subject. He's currently scheduled to bring his group here to City Hall every Wednesday, and he meets with people here at City Hall. But we talked about whether we need to adjust that, and we'll probably have adjustments on that at the next Wednesday meeting.
Okay. Tom, do you have another question, or you are complete? Okay.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Your hand's still showing up. Stephen, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, a couple things. I think it's very important to realize the timeline on these audits. I think that's important because without the audit, it's hard to make financial decisions. And I'm also, and this is directed to the comment that the mayor made about the findings of misbooked grant, if I'm phrasing it properly. Can you explain a little bit more of that? I would think that that's something that the department does every day. So I'm wondering if we're going to find more issues. I hope not, like that. But that seems to be, that would alarm me if things are getting this close.
So I'd be glad to respond. This is not abuse or any kind of, theft or anything at all like this. This is just incorrect accounting practices, if you will. I don't have all the details. As I said, Joe Centofanti is the one, digging into this, because again, I do not have control over the Board of Ed side. This right now is a Board of Ed issue. Not to say the city's not going to have any issues, but right now this was the issue that he felt was important because it had happened before. There was also, a lot of issues with FY19. So again, as soon as we find something out, and as I said, we can, I think it's a great idea that we're going to, if Joe's going to be meeting weekly with us, that we can, send any information over on a weekly basis as long as, that continues.
And the Board of Ed should be aware of their findings and be able to report out on their findings and bring us up to date on that, number one. Number two, I do want to make a comment on the FY19. It wasn't similar findings because it wasn't grant related. I specifically worked with Centofanti and had a deeper dive on that particular audit in that year when some issues occurred, and that had to do with invoices and the recording of invoices and the regular accounts payable and accruals. It was accruals that had not been booked in the proper fiscal year, and a restatement was done in that year. So this topic is a little bit different. It's definitely different than the accruals. And the city had issues in accruals as well. So it was both city and it was Board of Ed at that time. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Then we will move on to the review and discussion and the possible action of a 5-year plan today. And the city has submitted their first draft of their 5-year plan that occurred on June 9th. And the plan has been revised based on the feedback that they got from the subcommittee. The city also has prepared today a presentation to give us an overview of where they're at with their plan. So I guess I'm going to turn it over, or is Julian running the thing? I'm going to leave it to whoever is going to present on this.
I'll be David, I'll be presenting. Mayor, did you want to make any comments at this time?
No, David, I'll let you go, and then if there's anything I want to add at the end, I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Julian, did you want to share the PDF?
Sure.
Or not the PDF, the PowerPoint, I'm sorry. So we just thought it would be useful to prepare sort of a run-through at the top, at the outset of the review, to sort of walk through what we've done, what we've done since the last time we talked, and that is, as I think Kim mentioned, largely an incorporation of the advice that we got from the MARB and the subcommittee. Then we're going to talk about and see how it applies to the revenue assumptions and expenditure assumptions, and then where that lands us after 5 years. Go ahead. So far as updates, two things that we heard very loud and clear in previous meetings is that we needed to provide for a repayment of the $3.9 million loan, and you'll find that that is incorporated in here. The balance as of the end of 2027 is now projected to be 1.5 million. That payment would need to be made in 2028. And you can see here how we were able to fund that. There's also in the plan, and another item that was brought to our attention, debt service to pay for $60 million worth of new bonding, in which we believe will cover capital projects that we have now, as well as a provision for capital projects that we're not aware of at this time. Okay. And then talking about the revenue, in order to accomplish all this, our mill rate will go up 4 mills in 4 years. The growth in the grand list plays a lesser role, and you can see that in the chart that's provided. We maintained our collection rate, our assumed collection rate at 98.4%, which we went over last time. There's no change there. The other fluctuations in revenues are really limited to state aid, which we have increasing $2 million in 2023 based on what was provided from the governor, and it remains constant for the rest of the time. Now, all of these things are gone over in more detail in the assumptions pages, but I just sort of wanted to give you an overview before we got there.
Thank you.
Yes. The next page, highlights that we used a 1% rate for growth in motor vehicles, 0.5% rate for growth in real estate, personal property. Obviously, the 1% under the FY23 budget was not used to come up with that number. As we all know, motor vehicles went up quite a bit in the current year. Also, you can see that we've got different developments that are underway or planned that we see growing the grand list over in future times. It's important to note that this has been pushed back 1 year from the previous 5-year plan. Finally, on expenses, on salary and benefits, there really are no change here from the previous submission. Many employees are tied to bargaining units, whether they're in one or not. And as with last time, Lockton provided the health insurance increases, and Milliman gave us the pension estimates. On to debt and inflation. As I said before, we have worked with Mr. Lindsay and come up with a projection of what debt will be needed over the next 5 years. And it's enumerated there. In addition to the general fund, which we're talking about now, Allentown Fire Department's going to need $6 million, and the sewer department will need $56 million. And then again, there's the $2.4 million of repayment on the loan is incorporated into the plan. And then just a comment on inflation, which is no change from last time. So where does that land us? Over the period, we're seeing an increase in the fund balance of $11 million. And this is from what we believe to be a conservative estimate of $1 million surplus in the current year, and almost $4 million in fund balance increases over the period. The chart demonstrates a couple of things. The fund balance is higher than it will be higher in each successive year than it was in the previous estimate from a dollar perspective, and remains at the levels of growth that was set as an objective in the last 5-year plan. And then again, we did incorporate within all of this, we were able to make repayments on the loan, which is very important to us. So that's the sort of overview of what you're going to see in detail. Obviously, at any time, any questions that you have.
Thank you, David. This is helpful. I will turn it over to see if any of the MARB members have questions first before or staff before I start digging in with a few questions. Hi, Bob.
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
this may wait till, maybe to the deeper dive. I suspect we're going to spend a lot of time today on fund balance, but the starting point, this is a point of information. On page 26 of the materials that we have today, there were about 2.2 million of fund balance adjustments. And my question is, what are they? And for FY23, there is projected to be a 9.2 million fund balance. My question is are those items, including a CRF adjustment, are they included in the 9.2 and to be taken out if they come true? Or is the 9.2 on top of those adjustments?
No, these items would be included in the 9.2. If they come to fruition, the money is there.
If the CRF audit comes in at 500 or something like that, the balance would be, the fund balance for that year would be 8.7. Is that correct?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, if it came in at that amount and it is assigned to the city to pay it, then the city would have to pay it, and that would affect the fund balance. If somebody who's going to jail is told to pay it, then that would potentially not have an impact on the fund balance.
Well, if they in fact pay it, but we'll get into that. When we talk CRF, we're talking two things. The DeMassa embezzlement, which may or may not be part of CRF. And two is the ongoing conversation with Cone-Resnick.
Yeah,
And I hope you get that number down. But that total, I think, is about $1.5 million. And you squeeze that into 5 months. Okay, so I at least understand how you're presenting it. Kim, I'd like to have further discussion of that at the appropriate time.
Sure.
if I could give a little perspective.
If you wanted to, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. When I was reviewing all of those invoices yesterday, I didn't see any that were inappropriate. So it looks to me like the sample that Cone-Resnick pulled, now that's in my opinion, obviously. The sample that they pulled, now that we're providing the actual invoice copies, et cetera, should support an appropriate claim against the grant.
We're getting background.
But it's likely there'll be some disallowance, right? Maybe not the 800 that they're talking about, or million, whatever.
I'm not prepared to agree with that.
Okay. No, I wish you luck. I think that would be great, but,
This is good news that it's being worked on and that we're going to at least satisfy the documentation that they needed for some time.
And just while we're on this, on page 26, the other fund adjustments are, there's a big one, fund balance adjustment contingency other, 1 million. What is that?
Page 26?
Are you on page 6 of the PowerPoint, or, 26 of the PowerPoint, or are you on?
All of the materials that were previously distributed. I'm not moving forward, the PowerPoint is.
No, I'm sorry, I meant PDF, forgive me. The PDF and the materials that were sent, I just want to be clear about, is it the number, because I'm looking at page 26 and I'm not finding where you're speaking, so I want to make sure.
Of the presentation, also known as
The PDF.
31.
31, okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll use that number, okay.
No, I just wanted to be clear of which, is it the page of their report or the page of the PDF? Okay.
So I believe that
Thank
number
you.
should be 1,080,000, not a flat 1 million. Is that, I would just want to make sure about.
It is.
Okay.
1,080,000, that's what I meant.
That's effectively a planned surplus.
A what?
A planned surplus, which would be deposited in fund balance. It's a planned surplus for the purpose
It's
of
already
growing fund balance.
included, right? You said all those things are in the 9.2
Yes,
already.
as of the end of the year. You can't get there.
So you're projecting a balance, a surplus.
It's a planned surplus, it's not a projected surplus. A projected
So
surplus would be an addition.
they're budgeting to increase fund balance. They're not waiting for all of their results of revenue and expense.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. That's,
Okay.
at least we know. And just to be clear, the, adjustment for the police of 150 and the ADC assigned of 500 is what? What is that?
So, in all the calculations for the police, we did the best we could on the budget. There were some questions, and what we have done there is we said, we might be shy, and so we've assigned some fund balance toward, the potential for errors there. And then the ADAC, there was a lot of conversation around the actuarial report and whether or not, these things would actually pan out the way that was projected. We felt it prudent to say, we're going to earmark some of our fund balance in case there is an increase in that was not projected by the actuary.
Okay, final question before we discuss later what it all means, is what is the difference between a contingency and an adjustment to fund balance? My concern is that, at least with my small mind, if I'm trying to mark progress on the fund balance, I got to keep in mind that there's all these, well, if this happens, if that happens, if this happens, if that happens, the number goes down, as opposed to budgeting with those as a contingency and a lower fund balance with the notion that if good things happen, the fund balance goes up. Is there a principle behind contingency and fund balance adjustment?
So yes, the fund balance adjustments, as I stated before, are planned surpluses in the plan, where we charge taxpayers and anticipate revenues from the state, et cetera, in excess of planned expenditures. The contingencies.
That's the 1,080,000. What about the others? CRF is not a surplus, it is a potential deficit.
Again, those are all items that would be funded by the sources I mentioned and are planned to be pushed into the fund balance and earmarked for these purposes.
Okay,
A
on
contingency.
CRF then, I'm having trouble. Last week,
CRF.
last time, I understood Scott to say, the CRF was in the event the city has to pay back some money. It was not a projection that DeMassa and Bernardo are going to fork over in 23 $500,000. Because number one, the DeMassa expenditure has been made. I don't know the basis for withholding that from 22. That money has been expended. You're not waiting for, I don't know what you're waiting for. The report says DeMassa pay back $630,000. That doesn't mean you don't have to pay. The feds want you to pay, and you go chase DeMassa. So any projected surplus would be the amounts you think, based on reasonable evidence, that DeMassa is going to pay back. But at a minimum, you've got to take back the $630,000. I don't see it. And we went around and around with Scott at the big meeting, where he was explaining to me this is off book because it's a grant, and that finally penetrated my thick skull. And then I realized it had nothing to do with my question. Because, as Scott appropriately said, every dollar in CRF fund is earmarked for things that the city said they spent. Okay? So there's no surplus. And the DeMassa money is gone. And my thing is that the DeMassa loss has not been reflected in either the budget, it has not been reflected in 2022, nor in the 5-year plan. And the notion that DeMassa and Bernardo might be able to pay something is justification for you not to book the loss strikes me as bizarre.
To my knowledge, in FY '22, and David, please I don't know if you can confirm this, is that, and Julian, I think that you have already worked with Mr. Malone as well as the city, and the FY '22, is it 22? It wasn't 21. Expenditures that DeMassa had, because it goes over 2 fiscal years, okay? 2 fiscal years were the expenses. That was already to be expensed out in FY, a portion maybe in 21 and in 22, under the COVID line in the general fund, and those expenses will be already expensed out. When we were receiving the reports in the past, it was loaded under a line called COVID within the contingency other.
Yeah,
If someone could point,
Let me, hold on, let Julian help me out.
if you're
Page
telling me
26, Julian.
I feel better, but that's not what I heard Scott say.
I understood, and I tried to put clarity to that.
And I don't see it here. I'm looking at page 31, and,
It's on that page.
FEMA COVID expense. FEMA COVID expense? I guess I don't understand what that is.
Those are the expenses. So in 21, the $2.1 million that is sitting under account number 56352 is the COVID. $2 million expensed out.
Okay, and that is from
Everything.
general fund,
This is general fund.
All right. Okay, so your point is that it has been expensed
Last year.
in 21. And the 2.1, which is, I forget what the DeMassa theft was, it was under $1 million, but, so there's another $1 million of expense.
Yes, sir, 1.2 was the number from before that where the CRF funds that were given from
So
the
that's
state.
Cohen Resnick, so the 2.1 is DeMassa and Cohen Resnick.
Yes, no, CRF, I don't want to call it Cohen Resnick, I want to call it CRF.
1.5.
I appreciate that, okay, I've got enough.
Thank you. Are you okay? Perfect. I think Stephen has been waiting next. It's the next hand up. Stephen?
Yes. Let me just get back to the page, because I've been bouncing around here. I think. So if you go back to the top of the PDF that Julian sent, the 5-year financial plan general fund grant list projections.
Can we get on the same, I want to get on the same page just so that we're all together. I think, well, I just think it's better for all of us if we are on the same page.
I believe it's page 5. From the top.
Of the report or the PDF?
The PDF, the grant list.
Okay.
And we have, in fiscal year 26 and 27, they they have 10 million, well, 1 million, 10 million, and 10 million is for the Haven project. Is that a realistic figure? Everything I've read portends to the Haven project not going forward. So I know it's 10 million bucks, right? So is that realistic?
Mayor Rossi, can you comment on that?
The Haven project right now, and I know Lee Kiernan is on the call as well. We have met with them, and we're looking at different options because obviously it's been a very much stalled project. The land, they have acquired all of the houses, but only knocked down partial. I know that they used part of the DECD grant, which again, I believe I saw an email yesterday from Lee Kiernan saying they would have to pay that back. So Lee, if you could weigh in on those particular issues. But right now, I have met with them. State Representative Borer was on the call. State Representative Trinae McGee was on the call. State Representative Charles Ferraro. And we did have a meeting which was very non-productive. They had no sense of urgency. Since then, they have called back and contacted and said they do want to work with the city and they do want to get some sort of development there. We just don't know at this point in time what that development is going to be.
Well, it seems to me that to plug in $10 million in fiscal 26 and 27, when you really don't have any definitive guidance from the people that own the project, seems a little misstated. And when I see numbers like that, they just kind of jump out at me. So I'm suspect on those two numbers.
We had the assessor take a look at it, and she left it pretty much the same because, again, we can put zeros there. But no one at this point in time knows what the project is going to be at this time. It does not sound like it's going to go back to what the original plan was. And that being said, again, DECD has been very actively involved. They were on the call. And we're going to continue to work to get something down there because obviously we don't want vacant land at the entrance of our city as well. As I said, Lee, I don't know if you've heard me before as far as weighing in, as far as saying that the ECD.
I'm right here. So,
Just seems to plug in $10 million as your highest dollar figure in whatever development project that could possibly be impactful to your financial well-being just seems a little overstated.
And you may be right. We, again, don't have a crystal ball. We're working with what we can. And obviously, we're not doing it, next year. There are out years. And again, a 5-year plan is just that. It's a plan. And we want to go forward. And we still want something down there. Obviously, we're not going to, push forward to leave it the way it is. Because it looks terrible. The residents are upset about it. And, well, we should be. So something is going to be developed there. And it's going to have an assessed value with it. So what we did was, and this was the assessor, I had the assessor take a look at it. This was not me, because I'm not an assessor, so I didn't get involved in the actual assessment of it. But this is what she came back with.
if I may, Madam Chair, Lee Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, so the official position of the Haven is that they're still going forward with this project, and of course, if they weren't, then we would be seeking reimbursement of the demolition funds that they've spent thus far. So I would guess that could be why that's their official position. For a lot of different reasons, I don't think their model, they've found that their model works. If COVID were to end tomorrow, maybe it would. But if COVID's with us like the flu, it looks like it might be a problem. So they have gone forward. They're working on the hazmat to demolish. It's a lot of houses. The pipe coverage union was very powerful in the day, so every pipe imaginable in a certain period of time in the state of Connecticut was covered with asbestos. So each house has to have their own hazmat plan, so they're trying to put that together right now. And we hope to have demolition permits from them and demolishing the site straight away. They've invested $41 million in the site. We are confident that regardless of if they abandon their plan, which is all that's approved for that property, then I don't think they're going to be looking to, plant corn or just leave it vacant. They're going to be looking to, they're a capitalistic business and they're only in the retail business. So they're either going to be looking to offload it or submit a different type of plan. So is 10 million the right number? I have no idea. Is 0 the right number? I guess if you're really cautious, but it's unlikely that waterfront property would stay, that cleared waterfront property remediated from all hazard with a new bulkhead would remain vacant until 2026.
How much was the grant, Lee, from DECD?
Yeah, it's a $5 million grant. What was negotiated was that some money could be $2 million, up to $2 million could be used for demolition, but the $3 million had to be put aside because they had to get a permit from DOT for the heavy traffic, and so they were going to provide that because they were going to have to widen the road on Elm Street up through to the highway and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Tim, there's one other thing I do want to add. Also during the meeting that I spoke with, what they wanted from us, but we said no, they wanted to access additional money from the grant, and absolutely not. We're all in agreement with that, with an absolute no. If they want to continue demolition, which I hope that they do, now they're talking about using their own funding to do it and not the DECD grant, which is the way it should be.
Okay. Any other comments on that particular topic? Okay. Then, let me see, who was next? I only see one hand up. I thought Tom's was up and he was next, but I don't see him here right now. So, oh, there, Tom, I thought your hand is down now, right?
Yeah, I was struggling a bit with the topic that Bob White was on, and I was just trying to understand. I was going back a little to the COVID expenses and what's reflected as an actual of that $2,117,000, and then it looks like if we scroll up to the revenue side of the 5-year plan, it shows revenues under COVID relief of $1,212,000. So
that was the advance, was the $1,000,002. So their expenditures were higher than the actual funds that were allotted to them. So if you'll recall that originally DEMASA's expenses were loaded in as COVID relief funds, and when it was discovered, however, under the prior finance director and when he was doing the audit with Cohen Resnick, those expenses stayed in operating and were not to be used. That's why you're seeing a lesser revenue versus the expenditure. So they're not, even though they're in that COVID category and their expenses are in that line, they were not submitted to Cohen Resnick.
So it looks like they've got COVID expenses in the general fund that exceed the revenues in the general fund.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
$904,000 roughly. Is that accurate, and does that pick up the DEMASA theft? Is that accurate?
To my knowledge, it is. I don't know if anybody can confirm that.
That's my understanding.
Right.
Okay, that was really my question, was just needed to understand that a little more clearly, so.
Julian, are you aware as well, to your knowledge?
That's my understanding of what that 2 million is. It's all inclusive.
It's all inclusive.
Okay.
All right. is this about the same topic, Bob? Because otherwise
Yes,
Pat
it
has
is.
been
Yes, it
waiting.
is.
Okay.
To follow up, then that explains Demasa, thank you. If that's, and I think I'd like the city to respond, because it's their view that carries, and,
I understand, but also I want you, the staff has been working on this.
As is the auditor.
The question is, how is the Cohen-Resnick CRF finding that there was 800 and something that was inappropriate? That is, you're not making a contingency for that because you feel completely confident that every nickel is appropriate. Is that correct?
We have a contingency of 500 that is in the plan that was approved by the MARB a week ago. And I would say our responsibility is to come up with a reasonable estimate of what we believe to be true. We do not believe the number provided by Cohen-Resnick is a reasonable estimate.
Understood, and I wish you luck.
Thank you.
I'm having trouble. The 500 you told me was an additional surplus, not a contingency for some amount being disallowed. And we went through the last item, which was the 2.17, and we determined that that was the amount legitimately expended, 1.2, plus 900 embezzlement.
I don't want to say embezzlement because some of that is a non-allowable. It could be the non-allowable cost.
I want that to decide. It may be, it may not be. That, I mean, am I being clear? I'm sorry if I just want to know if you're accounting for the potential you're going to have to give back some money based on the audit.
Yes, but I believe that we are earmarking sufficient funds inside of the general fund that we can use to make that payment if there is one.
Okay. And where is that in your submission? Is that on the item that is on page 31, the contingency CRF?
That is, yes, that is the 500,000 that we put in the budget for next year.
All right, so the whole thing is that Cohen-Resnick, I guess, kind of said that most of it is disallowed. Okay, I understand now, thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick is next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so, I guess the couple of things, all the issues we've been talking about. One, I have an issue, I agree with Steve regarding plugging in the Havens project or anything going on from there. To sit there and be speculative with a project that's been basically going nowhere for 4 years. I think for us to approve anything with that in there is negligent. As far as the money that's been allotted, that Bob's been talking about, our money set aside or however expended, I guess two things. One is the funds that Mr. Demasa allegedly stole or embezzled or whatever the term you want to use is, and the money that's been disapproved, that's plugged in to picked up by contingency or by fund balance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, in FY '23.
Okay, so, okay. And the other thing is, touching on, I don't know who said it, is Scott on this call?
He is not.
Okay. Is the police mentioned shortcomings as far as funding the, the police expenditures? What does that mean?
It is a reserve for errors, in case we have miscalculated anything on that. There were some, just some finer points that weren't completely resolved. That was put in there back when we didn't have an approved contract with the policemen. We believe that there's plenty of money in the expense line items for salaries within the police department to cover all of those raises, but just in case, we thought it was prudent to have a little bit set aside, and in fact, 300 this year and 150 next.
So, I guess my question is, as far as the raises go, I mean, that should be fairly easy to account for.
Yeah, we believe we have it correct, and I believe this is potentially excessive.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you, Patrick. Christine, you're next.
Thank you, Ms. Kennison. So I want to get back to the assumptions around repayment of the embezzled funds, or the DMASA funds that we've been calling it. And I recall Mr. Jackson describing the assumptions that went into determining that $500,000 would be sufficient to address what we know is, could be as much as $892,000 disallowed expenses. Specifically, I recall Mr. Jackson describing a theory of recovery, that there was an assumption that some of those funds could be recouped. And I think there was a fair amount of pushback on that. And I'd like to just get clarity from the city, to what extent do there remain expectations of recovery to address any disallowed expenses?
Thank you, Ms. Shaw, Attorney Lee Kearney. I want to be a little terse here because I don't want to give away any sort of litigation strategy, but I will share what I feel I can. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, we have one plea agreement, and they are viewing everyone as joint and severally liable, which means each individual person would be liable for the whole thing that went to their individual LLCs or whatnot, which expands your opportunities for recovery, of course. And there are different ways to recover, but they will have restitution requirements as part of their sentencing. And when those restitution requirements are in place, they will be mandated to make those payments, but in addition to that, we will have the civil courts in order to help with recovery. But obviously want to maximize what the federal government's going to do in terms of setting that recovery up. And you look to all assets. And I don't want to, there are some parts of this discussion which could be heard by the parties who are supposed to make the payments, so I don't want to tip them off as to where we might find the money. But I would say recovery is not zero, but I would also be surprised greatly if recovery was 100%. Unfortunately, we're self-insured, so it's within our deductible, so there really isn't a way to get it through insurance. But we're still looking down that prospect in terms of whether or not one or more of the coverages would be in play. But, our position is going to be to aggressively go after every nickel that we can go after, every asset that is in play, so on and so forth. But yes, it would be prudent. I don't know if you have to put it at zero, but I would, if I were planning it, I wouldn't plan for any more than a 25% recovery just to be safe.
I
I wouldn't put anything in yet, so, and I haven't heard that we have put anything in from a financial perspective.
Yes, and I wouldn't disagree with that either. I'm just saying I wouldn't go above.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I wouldn't go above 25%.
Yeah.
All right, so just, thank you, Mr. Terrence. And I appreciate the insights, but in terms of the methodology for, the assumptions, what the city can reasonably be expected, or what it ought to plan to pay out in the worst case scenario, I would counsel in favor of the most conservative assumptions, meaning, the most that the city could pay out ought to be factored into, the plan, and any additional monies recovered, that could inure to the city's benefit. But I do think there is a big question mark, and it's not, I think that the co-resident assumptions and the determination of the $892,000, to the extent that you can move off that, to Mr. White's point, we wish you well with that endeavor, but from a budgeting perspective, a more conservative approach is warranted here.
All right, thank you, Christine. Any other questions regarding their 5-year plan? Or discussions? Julian, do you have any questions?
And not at this time. I see more hands up though.
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah,
Mr. Hamilton.
I was just going to chime in on the Havens project issue, and I agree that seems to be really rather speculative at this point to include it in the plan, given, we don't know now whether or not we're going to have the so-called soft landing, or whether we're going to end up in a recession, sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. And the impact of COVID and the impact of online retailing and what that's done to brick and mortar retail. I mean, you put all those things together, and the history on this project being that it really has languished along. I think it's probably going to be a new development project that needs to take its place there, and to include that right now in the 5-year plan when there's really nothing on the table, I think is speculative, and I would recommend taking it out. Now, the only thing sort of mitigating it is they have pushed it out. It's in, year 4 of the plan or something, so it's not immediate, but all things considered, given the history, I think it would be better to take it out and to adjust the mill rate to reflect that. And then obviously, if the project really kicks into gear and happens, and in this original time frame, then great. That can always be adjusted going forward. So it'd be my recommendation to take the Havens project out at this point.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. White?
Yeah, the 2 other points. One is the repayment of the MARB, the 3.9 in MARB, kind of tagging off on the last item, is that's been pushed out to the out years. I think maybe even beyond the agreement with Jeff. I would, think that the amounts repaid should be spread out a little more evenly, with it coming out of the earlier years as well, and not put it all in the end and, Havens didn't come through and sorry. And, Jeff said that, well, they're not gonna leave until they pay it back, but, at some point, there's diminishing returns. Secondly,
Just one question, to piggyback off of yours, Bob. Julian, please confirm, I thought it was 2028 that they had in their restructuring agreement to pay it back. Do you recall?
Yes, that FY '28 is the final year.
Okay.
So that would be 1.4 and 28, and, about 1.7 or so in the last 2 years. So again, spreading it out, I don't have any trouble, doing what Jeff agreed to, which is the 28, but I think there's got to be a little more even spread. Secondly, we ought to look at, as we discussed at the big meeting, what the fund balance goal is. I'm using, just 28 as a rough peg for the city getting out of Tier 4. We can talk about that for a lot, but just for the sake of conversation. Whoever put together the bond ratings and the fund balance, thank you so much. I don't know as much about that as others here, but it seemed to me that you're looking at least 10% as a bogey, maybe more. They have 6.19% in 27. So I think that we'd like to have them, by the time they leave, have a quote healthy fund balance, and that may be 10%. So they've got a lot of work to do to build up fund balance. And for me, I would like to see expense reductions rather than mill rate increases. This is the cynical part in me that we all know what's going to happen if the mill rate goes up. MARB made us do it. And one of the goals that we have in Tier 4 is to change the culture so that the city has its own desire to be on the straight and narrow and not depend on us to be the bad guy. So I would ask during this in the next year that the city come up with, as Hartford has done, and it to come up with some savings over the next few years. What can they do to increase savings? Because they got a long, this is a deep hole. If you start paying back the MARB money sooner and you try to build fund balance more quickly, and you've got this development that's stalled, the problem. And I don't think all of it should fall on fund balance or paying back the MARB. So, and I'd like to see it come out of expense to spare the taxpayers, as City Council has said. If they're serious about that, then they ought to start finding expense reductions. Anyway, that's my thought.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions or comments? I will,
I have
go ahead, Patrick.
So I'm just trying to figure out here, so there's nothing budgeted for, if it's allotted, the repayment of the 3.9 million, that doesn't start until 24, and then it ends in 28.
So if I could, we would like to make a payment of $100,000 today. I know it's small, but you haven't spent all that money yet either, so.
We haven't spent any of the money yet. Just for the record, that's one thing that I do want to bring to everybody's attention, is that in a very quick turnaround from the last meeting, the contracts were executed, the funds were left OPM, went to West Haven, all hands on deck, all hands on deck at OPM, and the funds were returned, and we just received them. It wasn't yesterday, I believe it was Tuesday. And that was a heavy lift in itself, just to turn all of that around rather quickly. So it is in our hands at OPM.
Yes, in fact, I sent an email to Julian yesterday, haven't checked to see if he's written me back yet, but asking for instructions to make a repayment. I'm not sure if he's even the right person to ask, but he was my contact.
So, the provision that the city wanted, that they asked to be added, was not added in.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I don't either, Patrick.
So there was a provision
Oh,
for the memorandum of agreement.
It was removed.
that's right.
It was revoked, okay. And, don't we have to have an approved, at least 3-year plan before restructuring funds are issued under the statute?
I believe Julian looked into that, and that was a no. And
Is it no?
I believe, I'm not.
Julian, you're here.
Yeah, the statute doesn't require that a 5-year plan be approved for the distribution. There's a process for submitting and making the requests.
It doesn't require that any financial plan, even a 3-year. That's what my understanding was under the statute, that you have to have a approved 3-year plan in place for the issuance of restructuring funds.
No, just submitted.
Submitted, so it should be. Okay, so there, and then does it need to be?
Informed is not.
And then the secretary makes a determination based on financial need and condition and so forth, and then confers with the MARB and that, that aspect of it.
So timeline.
But it doesn't specifically require that the plan be approved, or that there be an approved plan in place.
Okay, all right. So I guess my question is why are we waiting till 2024 to have this money start to be paid? Why isn't it budgeted to be paid starting this year?
It's actually budgeted.
Well, that budget, okay.
It's budgeted in FY '22, '23, '24 through '28, although we're not talking about '28. We want to start making payments in the current fiscal year, which ends today.
All right, and what is the, amount for each year?
I believe you'll find that on page 31, as has been talked about. I think that's 31 in the document. Am I wrong? Is that right, Julian?
It's on page 26 of the plan.
Yes. I just wasn't sure where it ended in the...
And it shows sort of modest contributions. The first few years, if you've already kind of described it, and then ramping up in the out years.
Yeah, it's 56210, consulting services MARB payments.
Right, so over the 6 years, what are the 6 payments?
Starting in 22, 100, then 100 in 23, 100 in 24, 450 in 25, 750 in 26, and 900 in 27.
And then what happened in 28, what? Or something, 28?
Well, that,
Yeah, 1.4
1.5.
is the final, which is kind of high, and that was Bob's comment.
Yeah, and in so right now, we're at a bill rate of 34 and change, something like that?
34 flat, thank you, yes.
And then when does that jump?
It goes up every year. I think you can see that on, is it page 4 of 26 of my numbering. You can see it going from 34 to 34.8 to 36.5 to 37.3, and then just over 38 in 27. Yeah,
Okay,
plus
so
fire, of
flat,
course.
it's flat for 22, right?
Flat.
34 for-
Flat for 23, yes.
And it's flat for 23. And then it goes up to what in 24?
34.85
Okay.
from 34.
So basically, we start seeing the bigger jumps from 25 out.
Yeah, 25, as you all know, is a big hurdle for us.
That's the bigger.
So why are we not kind of evening out this bill rate so the taxpayers aren't hit with, essentially like a 3 mil increase a few years down the road as opposed to bumping it up? Evening it out now.
Work on increasing the fund balance, work on increasing the repayment.
Yeah, this is my question for the city.
No, I'm commenting about it, I'm agreeing with you. I'm not speaking on their behalf, I'm speaking as a member and agreeing with you.
So why is that not done where it's, bumped up this year, so they're not getting whacked, there's not such a shock, a couple years down the road?
Well, we can ask them to take that into consideration, right?
Well, I'm asking that question now.
Yeah, this is the plan that we went with. It's a fair question. It's just not the way we did it. I really don't have any idea. I don't have it. Trying to balance that line between, helping the taxpayers with their payments and also needing to make these payments that we're talking about. I don't really have a great answer for you. I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone else on the team would like to make a comment.
So we can provide recommendations.
We do, it goes up between now and F25, the increase is 2.5 mils. We chose to use 0.85 and 30. We chose to use 0.85 and then the rest of
Start
it.
moving until 3 years out. I guess, and that's my, my concern. I think a little too much political calculus was built into the 5-year plan as far as the, the tax increases go. I share to a degree, what Bob said. I don't want to see people, to see them hit so hard, a few years out as opposed to evening it out at the same time. Whether it's expenses cut or revenue gain, really either one. I mean, if there's bills to pay, should pay. I just think it's kind of a little bit of probably a shock to the residents. But the town that in your out years, you're you're seeing like 9%, 8% increase as opposed to smoothing it out.
So a couple of, can I ask, I have a couple of ideas here. First of all, the residents will know that the ARPA funds have run out so far as the police salaries, and there will be an increase in 2025 that they're expecting to have to pay for. Additionally, the Board of Education has indicated that they need additional funding in that year. and the residents will need to pay for that. Also, what might be helpful is for us to have an anticipated spend rate of the $3.9 million from the MARB. I don't see a need to repay in advance of expenses. If you're sitting on the money and also sitting on the city's repayment money, that doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, we can move on.
Bob?
Yeah, before we leave, I was wondering about, at the big meeting, we heard someone from Carmody and Torrance speak about some kind of investigation they're doing for the city. We also approved a fairly vague scope of work for UHY, which was to be on a project-by-project basis. I think there was an agreement that the projects would be run through OPM before they were engaged on wood duplication. I'm just wondering where that is in the budget, and more importantly, if there is overlap with what the MARB is going to be doing. There has been conversations in the meetings. There have not been a final vote by MARB, but there are some of us who believe that some portion of the funds should be used for an investigation of past conduct that follows the Cohen-Resnick CRF report. They said it was likely that some of these practices had been ongoing beforehand. I would think it inappropriate. As a former prosecutor, it is inappropriate for, quite frankly, the target of some investigations to be conducting their own investigation ahead of us. So I'm wondering, and I may be misinformed on the role of Carmody or the role of UHY, and I'd like some clarity on what their scope is and where it is in the budget. And Lee, maybe you can do that. Thank you.
Yeah, so our intent is simply to have UHY and Carmody advise on the 9 million CARES Act spending?
Oh, right.
Yeah, and they would be paid out of the CARES Act funding.
You're talking about, not CARES, you're talking about ARPA.
ARPA, I'm sorry. So, that's our plan. Now, we do, the finance department, if they have emergencies in terms of staffing, we might ask UHY if they could fill a temporary need if that arose. But short of that, they really are just assigned to advise concerning that $9 million spending.
And that's
I want to piggyback off of that, because when the scope of work that came forward, Lee, if that scope has not been adjusted, now the MARB did not approve that contract because we were not in a place to approve it. We reviewed it, but we commented on it. So if that scope of work that was shared with us has already been executed, it would need to be amended because it does have overlap in the contract that was provided to us.
Yes, if we were going to use UHY for any purpose other than what I described, the mayor would contact OPM and go over with that if you think it's appropriate. We're not looking for overlap either. We're not looking to spend money twice.
I would agree. So if that scope of work that was provided has not been adjusted based on our full MARB meeting, I would suggest that it gets done and you present to us the new scope of work, because you are under contract with them for work that is already planned to be in a scope of work that will be under the Tier 4 contracts that we're going into.
Okay, I thought I took care of it, but I'll send you the contract, and if further adjustments need to be made, just let me know.
I think that that would be helpful so that this committee clearly understands that the scope of work has been adjusted. Yes, Mayor, you may comment.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would like, first off, for you to take a look at it, because we did believe we removed, I think there was an extra expenditure, or whatever, additional thing of $144,000. That was most of the question, and that was supposed to be pulled out. But at least this way, MARB can review it and let us know, because I agree, we're not going to spend money twice for the same thing. That's just ridiculous. I do want to then say another thing that Joe Centofanti told me during one of our meetings, and that was, he doesn't care who decides the quotes, basically. It's his role as the auditor, doing the annual audit, that he will be going into the CARES Act and any of the expenditures, and he will decide whether or not they are allowable or not. He said that is part now of all audits that need to be done, not only with us, but any, if there's any other misappropriations through the other 168 municipalities. And he told me that directly with one of our meetings recently.
Agree. He has to, because he has to audit it, and he has to do your federal report that goes to the federal government. Yes.
Correct. So I want to make sure everyone's always aware of that. He's going to make those decisions with it.
Right. The Cohen-Resnick audit was done on behalf of OPM of the money that we shipped out so that we have a pre-audit. Because we are required to do our own due diligence of funds that we gave out on behalf of the federal government.
And one last thing, as far as an investigation, just so Mr. White, because he brought this up, so I just wanted to know, because I don't know how closely you follow the council, but the city council, under the charter, are allowed to investigate anybody, issue subpoenas, and go forward. And they have already voted on, and Lee can correct me if I'm wrong, but they already have voted on going forward with an investigation, and I believe they have hired legal counsel.
Okay, I don't think that's appropriate if the MARB is going to do that. And I don't know.
It's the same budget money, right? It's not separate, right?
It is the same budget money, Kim. And again, I didn't get a vote, and I'm not having a seat at the table. I'm just making sure everybody is informed. I know actually Colleen O'Connor, one of the council members, is on here as we speak, because I see her name there. That being said, the charter does allow them to do an investigation. So I'm not the lawyer, I'm not getting involved in that, but the charter does give them the powers to do an investigation and issue subpoenas. So I don't know whose power comes who. I just want to make you aware of it so you're not surprised. It comes into the paper.
I appreciate your candor, because I hadn't heard that before, Mayor. Thank you. I'll put it on the table. I don't think that's appropriate. And I think MARB should be doing that investigation. Maybe there ought to be a sense of the subcommittee and discuss it at the full meeting. But, and I think, quite frankly, the optics are bad. City is investigating itself. I don't think if the MARB allows that it puts us in very good light. So that's my point. I'd like to hear the views of the other members.
Yeah, I'll share my views if we're waiting for some comment to what Bob said. If the city council has that authority, which I understand in the charter they do, they conduct investigations, issue subpoenas, whatnot. So that's within the purview of the city council. I think there's got to be some point in time we'll get through, these budget issues and the financial plan that we have some. I certainly have some questions about expenditures, regardless of if funds were necessarily used, of how they were authorized. A $20,000 COVID bonus. This is the two individual that came up in the audit, I don't know what that is, I was given the authorization of a payout for comp time for many employees who are exempt, and certainly what appears to be in conflict with the prior resolutions from the council and prior interpretations of those resolutions. But, I think I guess a couple points, the Bob's point is that one, Tier 4 is not the savior of all the things that have gone wrong. It's a higher level of oversight. That doesn't negate that we should be looking at those prior failures or breakdowns and find out why they happen, because that's how things get. I think the culture of issues that happen, and let's say get changed by saying, this makes no sense, and I'm sure it's not. And I think it's prudent for us to certainly look at those things, because the fact is it's both taxpayer money and it's state taxpayer money that we use to fund up like the issue of the alleged theft and other things. So, I think what we need to do is, handle it at the level of it, support it, but, it seems like we're kind of skipping over a big thing with Tier 4, and it's kind of like, okay, we're at Tier 4, let's start, let's almost like forget what happened and let whoever else is looking at things look at them. So that's not my position, certainly considered $16 million state taxpayer money that, to a degree, I think this should, as far as I'm concerned, this is appropriate. So, I think we should do some random sampling of expenditures. We've had, multiple issues with contracts coming before us that were for review. Now at Tier 4, there are actually, contracts are authorized with us. And that's a position I think that's really important to authorize contracts of $50,000. But there was like a dozen contracts over the past 6 months that never came to us in time and manner. And that's setting aside the whole spot with the police union contract. So I think we need to get kind of back into the weeds, because that's where the problems are. So it's the day-to-day things, and whether it's $1 million, which like somebody's eyes is a big issue, but it's at $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 dollars. I don't, as well, the city officials signed off yet on the form that we were speaking about, the ethics form. Has that been completed? I know we talked about that going back a month ago. Is there, we get updates in ethics?
If I may, Pam Albino, the personnel director, I believe is on it, so I don't know, on his call ID, and all the ethics forms did go out. My understanding is, do everyone is involved? I do not know what percentage or if everyone came back.
We're getting a lot of background noise, and it's hard to hear people. We need to go on mute until the one person has been spoke to. Thank you.
Yeah, so where were we with that? Do you know?
Percentage.
Pam, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm sorry, I wasn't
Can you hear us?
fully aware of the question, exactly?
Ethics forms to the city council.
Correct, okay, they were updated ethics forms, updated disclosure forms were distributed to every city employee. We have a majority of them returned, and I would say less than 10% have not been returned to date.
We can't hear you, we're getting too much. I'm going to put everybody on mute, and you'll have to unmute when you're speaking, because we're getting way too much background. We can't hear anybody.
Okay, I'll just repeat what I said.
You've been muted. To unmute yourself, press star. Okay.
Because
You are no longer muted.
I will just repeat what I just said.
Thank you.
The updated ethics forms and updated disclosure forms were issued to all city employees. This happened in May. By just eyeballing all the returned forms, I would say less than 10% are still outstanding at this point.
Okay. So we will have it
What's the
for you.
What's the date that you put that in, that we have to return to the office?
Well, I said within the next 2 weeks, but we have a number that have exceeded that period of time.
So what's the remedy for that?
Actually, I will address the ethic form return at the all department head meeting next week, which is on the calendar, I believe, for July 6th.
Okay, and I guess what I'm asking is that, those were issued when? What was the date they were issued? The forms went out with your memorandum as far as guidance, when they're supposed to return back.
Honestly, I don't have the exact date, but to the best of my recollection, it was in early May.
May 12th.
It was May 12th, actually. May 12th.
Okay, and you, May 12th, with a 2-week deadline, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so that brings you to the 26th, and now we're over a month past that.
There will be, I will send out a reminder requiring them all to be returned immediately.
And what happens if someone doesn't fill it out or return it?
Honestly, I don't have an answer to that question.
Okay.
All right. Colleen, I see that your hand is up, so I'm going to let you comment because I feel that I think that your comment is going to be relevant to Mr. White's question and Ms. Reagan.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. It is. The reason we asked for the investigation was because of many comments from our citizens. We spent over 5 hours in public comment in the month of April alone. So this investigation is in regard to that. We're not investigating the audit. We're using this investigation as a tool. We're not looking to cast any blame, but we want to know what's being done right and what's being done wrong in West Haven, so to make sure that this never ever happens again, so that we can move forward in a confident manner. So we don't feel that it's duplicitous of anything that the MARB is doing. We feel that it's something that we need for our citizens.
I just want to make one.
I believe,
Yeah. Who is that?
I'm sorry, I believe that, yes, this is Christine Shaw. I think what Bob White has asked for is comments from members of the MARB about the concerns raised about the city investigating itself. And while I appreciate Brian's comments, I think that the question really has to do with what is the role of MARB now that the city is in its report status. What we have are several concurrent reviews, let's just call them. We've got the immediate concerns raised by the Community audit and the step to address what were very significant shortcomings in the fiscal controls for the city. Then there is the, obvious necessity and urgency around getting a new auditor for the fiscal year 2021 budget. Then there's the ongoing oversight that comes with heightened review on the part of the MARB. So against that backdrop, we still have to satisfy for ourselves that the very significant internal controls have been addressed. And so from my perspective, addressing the scope of work of Carmody and Torrance is essential. I don't deny that the city ought to satisfy for itself that these mistakes will never happen again. But the reporting of the results of those investigations has to go to the right entity. And right now, the entity is the MARB. So, however, once we're resolved and it's satisfied for MARB's purposes that the scope of the investigation is consistent with the other areas of inquiry that we have laid out, and once we have satisfied that we are directly getting the reports about what happened, who's in place, what needs to happen in terms of remediation, I think that the reporting has to go to MARB and not the city. Now, to the point about, and I appreciate Mr. Egan's line of questioning and very focused on when these ethics forms were sent out, and the delay and the consequences for failing to submit them. I'm not satisfied or comforted by the fact that 10% remain outstanding. Because the 10% that remain outstanding, I want to know who it is that is not complying with the request. I think the city should tell us who has failed to comply with the request to abide by the city charter's ethics requirements and other ethics requirements. That kind of foot dragging on something that's so central to some of the most egregious findings in the Comresident audit, it is not acceptable. And I think for MARB's purposes, we need to have a very clear understanding amongst ourselves around consequences. The city has to have very clear expectations around consequences. This notion that, in response to a pointed question, what will happen if those ethics forms are not submitted? It is not, no one should be confused about that. And it is a very specific request that the city provide us a list of who has neglected to comply with the request around ethics. That is the level of oversight where what Tier 4 demands. And I think that, and I appreciate Mr. White focusing this line of questioning. We are not where we were a year ago. We are in a place where the MARB has to step up its expectations, and the city needs to understand that there has to be a different posture around these efforts to restore confidence in the city's financial affairs.
Thank you, Christine.
And I'd like to see that information prior to the next MARB meeting.
So, Mayor and Pam, we would like a list. I know that you're going to bring this up at your next meeting, but maybe you want to do this sooner. We would like a list of all outstanding folks and positions that have not completed the ethics paperwork, and also what are the consequences should they not?
Okay, I will have that prepared probably before the next meeting.
And then, Christine, our next meeting is July 14th, so definitely prior, because we would have a mailing on that. And that's fine. Thank you. Mr. White, I see your hand is up, and I want to make sure that we still are focused on the 5-year plan. If we have any other discussion about the 5-year plan, we're at 11:42. We do have some MOA action updates, but action plan updates from the prior MOU, which is the corrective action plan. If we aren't able to get to that topic, we did have disclosures. I just have a few comments to make about it. But the most important thing that I think for this meeting is still to continue with the 5-year plan and the discussion that we're having, unless folks felt differently.
I just had a short comment,
Okay.
Christine, which is, I think the MARB ought to have the completed disclosures, at least of the higher ranking people in the city. I don't know that they need to be made public, but, well, I think they are public, but, because I think that would help us direct various inquiries as to who has connections to whom. So in addition to the list, I'd like to have the actual ones for the top people. I'm done.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Back to the 5-year plan, because we ended up going off of that topic. There are a couple of things that I did want to comment on that I hadn't commented. I do agree that in that plan, I know the original plan was the 6%. We did see the rating information that was given. That was from a member of my team, Bill Plummer, who participates. He did do a great job of, I think maybe Julian helped him, but I do know that he covers this information, that he did provide us with 2 different ranges, and as we start to talk about the city, and we talk about the goals, and we talk about the end results of getting them fiscally healthy, and you see the groups of comparisons based on bond ratings, and the big, there's a big gap between those that are rated at BAA or triple B to those that are rated one tier up. Hold on, I don't see the rating on that one, the blue color. Those are BAA 1s and BAA 2s, and that group has a range of that 13%. So while you can see the healthy towns are falling out with the AAAs, and the the AA 2s, 3s, they're falling in a range of 16%. So as we start to do the progression and we start to look at the 5-year plan, while the original plan did state, and things have changed with the city from when we originally started to where we're at, I wanted to make sure that we still got back on the mark again with the fund balance, at least to not say that little progress was going on. Now you're at the 6%. But if you look at the 4 years out, there isn't a lot of growth. So your plan is taking you from a 5.59 to the 6.19. If I go 23 to 27, that isn't even, a percent of a growth. I think that growth needs to have a little bit more in your budget for embedding more into the fund balance. Because it's not even a 1%.
Yeah, the only instruction we were working with was to meet the objectives of the
Was to
project.
get it back on the mark. I understand. I understand. But, but that mark, if you do look at it fiscally, it's really not moving much.
I can't disagree.
Okay.
And it's interesting to note that the A-rated municipalities start at 3% for East Haven. I'm not sure why they're doing so well. And go all the way up to 25. I mean, I'm just looking at the details here, and there's quite a range.
But
I'm not
maybe they
saying-
didn't have a recent rating.
Yeah,
They may not have had a recent rating.
No idea.
I don't know that answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments about the 5-year plan?
This is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, quick question. I'm looking at the 5-year plan for Allentown.
Yes, sir.
No big deal, other than, what those move is fund balance is 25 to 30%, which is interesting. I don't think the town has any control over Allentown. I don't know what the relationship is. To me, it's still cloudy between Allentown and the city, but nonetheless, the 5-year plan from Allentown is subject to a variety of questions that I have, but I'm not going to ask them now. Just a couple questions for a response for the full MARB meeting, if I might please, for the town to respond. My understanding is the town gave money to the fire departments from the COVID fund this year, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
We approved.
That's accurate, I'd like to know for what. If you could provide the MARB with that, especially with fund balances over 30%. fund balances for all the fire departments, including the independent of the two, West Shore and the other one. That's possible for the next meeting. And two questions that I've been asking for years about. Who are the financial advisors for the pension funds for the fire departments? And all of the pension advisors, if you will, for all of the city's funds and the independent fire districts, who the firms are and the individuals. And I thought at one point in time, I know at one point in time that the report that's now 3 years old called for one financial advisor for all the fire districts, pension funds, talked about RFPs and all this other nonsense that's been delayed. I'd like to know the status of that. I don't think that they have any intention to comply, even though it's a recommendation from the fire district report way back when. So I'd like a response to the full MARB meeting. And also lastly, are there pension advisory boards for all of the pension funds that the town has and the fire districts have? And who are the members on those advisory boards? Is there union representation, management representation, etc.? Those are the only questions I have, but I wanted to get them out so that they could respond to the full MARB meeting, please. And I've already sent to a request that the secretary, our secretary, OPM secretary, send a letter to Treasury asking for a specific response to the legality of using the ARPA funds for the police contract the way it's structured. We seem to have some confusion with some people saying yes, some people saying no. I'd like OPM's secretary to acquire direct from Treasury what the money is being used for in West Haven, and if in fact that's a proper use of ARPA funds, so that we're not surprised. MARB took a vote that they could use those funds in that fashion under the assumption it was legal, but somebody raised the issue that it may not be, and I'd like to have clarity for MARB's own files and or records for the future. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
For my part, I'm hoping we can get that all in writing, because I could not keep up.
This is taped as well, but we, and it will be included in the minutes when they're drafted, but we can, we have to go back and draft those, so once we have that draft, we can, get that to you.
Yeah,
And just to make clear, Mr. Waxenberg refers to clarification from the Treasury. He's meaning the U.S. Treasury, not the private Treasury.
I understand.
And I'm not clear on
You
this
sure
one
you can't
thing.
help with that, Christine?
I defer to the federal government.
It would be easier for me to get the information from you.
I don't one question I didn't understand was why we shouldn't be using COVID funds to support our first responders. At least that's the way it sounded.
It's because it was a base increase and it was described as retention.
Oh, okay, I understand now. Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other questions about the 5-year plan at this moment? I think that we want the city to go back and consider taking some changes. We can go forward and give you a list of recommendations from the MARB. We can circulate what we heard in the recommendations today and get that back out and make sure that we have a complete list. I think that you heard it anyways from this meeting today, so I think that you shouldn't wait for a list. I do think that you should start to work on revising the plan. from what you heard of the conversation today, I don't think that we're in a position today to take any action on this 5-year plan, that a bit more work is still needed towards it, unless I hear differently from the members. And I see a guest that is asking to speak, but this is not an open forum for the public to speak at a subcommittee.
Thank you, this is Tom Hamilton. I just wanted to chime in briefly and support your request that they look to move that fund balance number a bit higher. I too think the fact that it kind of just plateaus at this roughly 6% number, given the data that was provided for other municipalities, and particularly other single A rated municipalities. I would feel more comfortable if they were to, ultimately get the number up closer to 10%. Maybe not within the 5-year period, but to move it up, 0.5% a year or even 1% a year, I think would be a good objective. So.
Thank you for those comments, Tom. I am in agreement with you on that. Your hand is still up. All right, we have 5 minutes left for this meeting, and I do want to end on time today. The next item on the agenda is to discuss the MOA, the action plans. Those were included in our packet for today with updates. I have not gotten an opportunity to look at those, I'll be honest with you. I put all my homework on the 5-year plan when and getting my comments there. But I will tell you this, I did do a lot of homework with the one before. So the one that was presented at the last subcommittee, I did spend a lot of time on. And to me, when looking at them, it showed to me that I felt as if some updates were needed. And Julian, I don't know if you had an opportunity to speak back with the city about my feedback. Probably not, right? Julian, are you with me?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we routinely ask for them to be updated before your meeting, so.
Right. You don't know what I'm referring to. No. So what I wanted to make sure occurs is that when I didn't review this one in depth. I did review the one prior, and in doing that, what I found is that some of the dates that were listed there as milestones. The milestone has come and gone, and the dates have not been updated. So I guess that it would be helpful if the plan could be looked at with a new date. You might have had a milestone of meeting it as of June 30th, and if it doesn't say that it's complete, then I would like to know when it's going to get complete. So I don't want to pick on anybody. That's not what my goal is. I just want to make sure that we can provide complete information for this group as well as myself. Just as an example, this is just an example, so I'm not zeroing in on an individual. Jermaine, if I look at your IT update and it states that your milestone was to complete the project as of June 30th, today is June 30th. So there, it still says pending resources, and as of June 30th, your budget has been approved. So somebody needs to communicate with Jermaine as if those resources have been provided or not provided, so that he can have a new update to his plan to understand that he has the funding to go forward and get a new date. So some of the areas that he brought to the attention here is vulnerability and its assessment and penetration testing. That I know is a critical item within IT. So I'm hoping to hear that those funds were set aside for a lot of the projects that I know are important to the IT group and the technology. You can see that you have a technology problem right now. Every time we have a MARB meeting, that we have backlash and you can't all operate properly. I think that's technology, but, can you please, take a look at these plans and go back and, get some update, and, it will be on the agenda for discussion again. I think that there were some situations with personnel as well, and in the personnel area, did it get approved or didn't it get approved, for the personnel? Any other questions while we just have a minute or two before, completing this meeting regarding the action plan? Any questions from the city about what my request is on that?
No.
No.
No? Okay. And it might mean that the plan needs to have another column and the original date of the milestones when it was supposed to be met, rather than just putting words over here. It could have a revised date with and an anticipated completion date, I think would be helpful. All right. If,
You guys need me with us.
that's it, I have no other business today. Does anybody have any other business? Julie, do we have other business?
Just one quick thing, just today, Michael Mylone's last day, as the liaison with, Ocam and West Haven. He's done a lot of work behind the scenes and sometimes not behind the scenes. And the partnership, working with getting the 5-year plans for the fire districts, their first 5-year plans ever. A lot of work on updating revenues and a whole host of things. And so a lot of the progress that has been made, he was directly involved with, so we're appreciative of all his hard work.
Thank you, Julian. We did not even discuss it, and I didn't even think about it, and shame on me. Michael, are you on the call today?
He informed me, this is Lee Turner, he informed me, he was instructed not to be on the call, but he's across the hall and I can get him, I guess. But I can certainly relay your wishes to him.
Thank you. I want to definitely thank him for all of his years of service with us and working, and we have put him in the thick of things, and when the city couldn't come through, Michael Malone came through for us to make sure that we were provided with updates for both of these meetings. He has really dug into some complex matters, and so, you know, he never stopped the fight. He kept still working towards that, and so he is also a real good person for us to work with, and we appreciate the hard work that he has done for us.
Yes, I would agree that Michael Mylone his efforts made the city better than it would otherwise be without his efforts.
Yeah, the few short weeks I've been here, I've really enjoyed working with Michael. I thought he was definitely an asset to the team and was a wealth of information.
Thank you, David. Can I say something, Kim? Yes, ma'am.
So it's funny, I did know today was his last day, and I didn't know if he was on the call because I didn't see like his initials or anything, but he truly was an asset and a help, not only, you know, to my office, but in finance, and he was very, very helpful and instrumental in doing a lot of special projects that definitely helped the city. So we can't thank him enough. He's a rock star to me, he's a great guy, and I'm sorry to see him go.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. All right, could I get a motion to adjourn? If we have no other questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I have. When are we gonna start having these meetings in West State?
I don't have that answer for you right now. So we will keep it as a topic to follow up on.
Why aren't we having?
Pat, I do need to leave because I have an important meeting, so we will definitely bring this up again and we can discuss it with the subcommittee, all of the members.
Yeah, I know.
Thank you.
I would expect we're gonna have these meetings back and we'll get these started. But that's still make those rules there.
Thank you, Patrick. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, have a great holiday weekend, and thank you all for your service, and wish you all well.
There's two